Hello, I'm Wanda from Prospects, and I'm here with publisher Julia Silk to celebrate National Novel Writing Month. Julia studied at the University of Leeds before receiving a master's in comparative literature from UEA. She's worked in publishing for over 20 years as an editor and has been an agent for the last 5, representing a wide range of fiction and non-fiction writers. Julia, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about your career so far?
Yes, well, in my 4th year, because I studied languages at Leeds, it suddenly occurred to me in about March that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I realised that I'd spent most of my academic career, I use the term loosely, lying on my bed reading novels when I was supposed to be working. So I thought publishing sounded like it might be a good direction for me. It is notoriously competitive to get into. Most people want to do editorial jobs in the big publishers that they've heard of, like Penguin and Faber and places like that. But actually, I ended up applying for those jobs and then finding a foot in the door working for an academic publisher, actually, where I learned a lot of skills that have kind of stood me in good stead throughout. And then kind of worked my way through that for a few years, and then book selling, which I absolutely loved, alongside working for smaller, what we call trade publishers. So the books that most people read in from bookshops and wherever they get their books. And then so that was like the first 10 years of my career, and then spent the next 9 years finally working for a bigger publisher, which was Orion, and then became an agent 5 years ago.
Very nice. You kind of answered this in your first answer, but when did you know that you wanted to work within literature? Was it always an interest of yours?
It was, yeah. I used to be a really voracious reader. I'd get through probably 3 or 4 books a week for my whole childhood, well into my 20s. I feel like my rate of reading has kind of slowed down. I think maybe that's partly a function of it being something that I do for work, and your brain sort of gets rewired to read in a different way. But yeah, that was what led me to it.
What is the biggest challenge that you've faced in your career so far?
Well, I think probably getting into one of the big 4, 5, one loses track publishers. It was always a kind of ambition to be in a big publisher and build my kind of connections and my experience. And I just worked my way through, kind of persisting until I got there finally.
Well, congratulations for crossing that boundary. How about and I suppose maybe it falls under the same, but what career moment are you most proud of?
I think even though I started working for a bigger publisher, it took a long time really for me to kind of realize that, much as I loved it and I loved working there and the people were amazing and I learned so much, that actually eventually I was probably more suited to doing what I do now, which is being kind of on the other side of the fence, working as an agent. Because when you work for a publisher, well, you work for them. When you work as an agent, you work for authors. And I think I always just felt like something was a little bit the wrong way around. And not that publishers are not on the author's side, but they have, different priorities. And I always felt like I wanted to do whatever was best for the author, and that I should probably be working for them.
That's a really interesting perspective that I hadn't really considered, but very interesting to hear. Do you yourself have a favorite book?
I have. I had to write a long answer for this because, and I was like, I
Impossible
need to write my
question.
answer down because I'm going to forget something. I just feel like I have different books for different times, whether that's different times in my life or different moods. I mean, I have a huge love for commercial fiction, and that's my kind of go-to comfort reading. So Georgetta Hare, who writes amazing like Regency, mostly sort of Regency romance, are absolutely brilliant, and I often go back to her, particularly when I'm not feeling well. I had COVID recently, and I just sort of lay in bed reading those and watching Netflix box sets. But I really love sort of, and then Lace is, I have a real fondness for the books of my kind of teenage years that I read probably before I should have done, which are the kind of big bonkbuster sort of Jackie Collins, and Lace is a total like absolute perennial favorite of mine. And then also real kind of commercial brilliant stories that speak to the times that we live in, like Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid, which is a brilliant recent book. And then books that feel like a kind of that sort of fiction, non-fiction kind of crossover, like In Cold Blood, that tell a true story but make it feel like fiction. I'm a big fan of those as well.
Oh, thank you so much for such a detailed answer. I've got loads of things to get going through there. Do you have any advice that you'd like to give maybe to current students or graduates who are interested in pursuing a career in publishing?
Yeah, I think the main one is that there's a perception that sort of publishing is editing and editorial, and that's the most important job, and it's the one that everybody knows about. But I mean, every part of the process is equally important and has sort of different aspects to it, which people might find play to their strengths more. An area of publishing that I think is really exciting, and that also is very kind of connected to what I do as an agent is selling rights. Those could be translation rights or various other film and TV rights, all sorts of different rights that are associated with books, and how as agents we help to sort of maximize the income that our clients make. And it's really fun. It's got a real kind of combination between sales and also that editorial side of getting to know the books, and really kind of knowing what publishers in other countries want to see and want to read. And it requires a huge, really sort of in-depth knowledge of publishing and the industry in general, which most people in publishing you'll find are kind of quite excited about and passionate about the industry itself, not just about their individual job within it. So um, definitely do your research, look around at what else is available other than editorial jobs, because they're also the hardest to get into, because I think partly because of that perception. And I would also say there are loads of resources online. Like before, when I saw that question, I literally Googled advice for getting into publishing, because I thought, well, what if I was just starting out, and what does that look like when you just Google that if you don't know where to start? And actually lots of quite useful stuff came up. There are lots of graduate schemes that the bigger companies do, and again, obviously they're really competitive, but I'd say that there's been huge efforts and strides made in publishing recently to make it more accessible and more inclusive, particularly people who don't sort of fit that kind of perception of publishing as being very white, middle class, privately educated. There are a lot of organizations that are encouraging and helping people who don't fit into those boxes, and a lot of publishers are very, very keen to make their workforces sort of more diverse and representative of the readerships that they want. So if you fit into that, then there will be opportunities for you, and there will be many more opportunities than there were maybe 10, 15 years ago.
That's excellent to hear. Thank you so much for that advice. And just to finish, where can people find you and your work going forward if they're interested?
So the agency that I work with is called Charlie Campbell Literary Agents, and there are four of us there, and we all have our profiles on that website. And there's I have a kind of list of the kind of things that I'm looking for when I'm looking for my clients, but I also have my social media accounts are also on there, so you can find me on Twitter. Publishers use Twitter a lot, publishing people use Twitter a lot, so if you start following publishing people on there, you'll start to see a lot of kind of conversations emerge, and people are, if you engage with them, kind of really friendly and helpful. So that's also another good way of trying to kind of find a way in. And I can send you all those details to pop on the bottom of
Yes,
the interview.
please do.
I've also
I'll have
got a
the
Pinterest board
in
with all my favorite
description.
books on there as well. So
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll remember that. Twitter is the LinkedIn of publishing.
it is exactly that. Yeah, completely.
Well, thank you so much, Julia, for those answers. And I will put all of those links below. Um, Thank you everyone for watching. And if you'd like to find out more about resources to do with your future and your career path, visit www.prospects.ac.uk. And feel free to request any future videos that you'd be interested in seeing. Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you everyone for watching.